So the test tube on the left here contains zinc nitrate solution, and here's the sodium hydroxide solution. Let's add 1 drop just. A couple of drops gone in there. Maybe easier to see this against a black background. And you can see a precipitate is formed there. And add a little bit more, a few more drops to the zinc salt solution, and you see the formation of a white sticky or gelatinous precipitate. What I'm going to do now is to add an excess of the sodium hydroxide solution to see if this precipitate should redissolve. And you can clearly see there that the precipitate does indeed redissolve. Here we have in the test tube in the middle a solution of aluminium nitrate. I'm going to add a few drops of the sodium hydroxide. And there we see again, rather like in the case of the zinc salt, we're getting a white gelatinous precipitate. A few more drops, more precipitate. Going to add an excess now of the sodium hydroxide solution, and we see once again that redissolves. We have the copper sulfate solution in the middle test tube here. It's blue in colour. Going to add a few drops of the sodium hydroxide, and there you see we get the precipitate formed, and that's a light blue precipitate of copper 2 hydroxide. Let's just add a few more drops. And with an excess, you can see the precipitate does not appear to be redissolving. So we've got copper hydroxide formed in that case. We have on the left iron 2 nitrate, and on the right iron 3 nitrate. I'm going to add some sodium hydroxide solution, 1 or 2 drops to each. And you can see a green precipitate forming there. And on the iron 3 salt on the right, you can see a brown precipitate forming there. So iron 2 hydroxide on the left is a green insoluble solid, and iron 3 hydroxide on the right is a brown insoluble solid. Going to the left again, let's add an excess to see if this precipitate will redissolve. And it doesn't. The precipitate will just simply form more of it. Adding even more, and the precipitate iron hydroxide is not redissolving with excess sodium hydroxide. And the one on the right, adding more and more and more, but no sign of the precipitate redissolving. The first one and the second one, the zinc and the aluminium salts, formed insoluble hydroxides, but they redissolved upon the addition of further sodium hydroxide, forming a soluble zincate and a soluble aluminate. With the copper sulfate, it formed a precipitate copper hydroxide which did not redissolve. The fourth test tube and fifth test tubes with iron 2 and iron 3 formed green and brown precipitates of the iron hydroxide, and again they did not redissolve. So here we see the copper hydroxide. Here we see the green precipitate of iron 2 hydroxide. And here we see the brown precipitate of iron 3 hydroxide.